Hello everybody, welcome to our event. I'm glad that most of my students made it, and actually I'm also glad that none of my students made it, other folks, including the graduate students. That's fantastic. This is the panel on German elections. We had a similar panel 4 years ago, and it is my particular pleasure to welcome our new German Consul General, Dr. Jürgen Borsch. Thank you for coming. And my very cherished colleague from University of Miami, Professor Louise Davidson. So thank you very much. Mr. Borsch has arrived very recently in Miami. He started in July, right? Yeah. He started in July this year, 2013. He had postings in a variety of places worldwide, in Warsaw, Damascus, Hong Kong even. And then in between, you were also, that's very interesting, I think, the deputy head and then later the head of the Crisis Response Center for the federal German office. So you probably, Miami, between the hurricanes and everything else, that may be a good posting, right? It should be very interesting. And likewise, Professor Davidson is not only the Europeanist and the German professor at my alma mater, University of Miami. In fact, she was on my dissertation committee, which I appreciate very much, but she specializes in German elections. And some of her publications, recent publications, were, for example, her book, Becoming Party Politicians, Eastern German State Legislatures in the Decade Following Democratization. That was published with the University of Notre Dame Press a few years ago. And then, so she also has worked on gender politics in Germany and the development of party discipline, in particular for the new East German legislator coming into the federal legislature. Okay, without further ado, because we have only about an hour, I would suggest that Mr. Borsch, you will give us a little introduction to the topic, and then you'll hear about the German elections first, and then I'll tell you a little bit about sort of the European and international implications. Thank you.
Thank you, man. I'll be seated if you like. I would just like to start with a personal remark. I'm not a party member, so I'm one of those flip-floppers of that typical generation. I think it's a mainstream syndrome at my generation. We have all been influenced by a book of Sebastian Haffner, quite famous. I think the translation would be Deliberations of a Flip-Flopper, a swing walker, something like that. And this is a fact that makes me feel and speak freely about the results of the German elections, since I do not have any own interest. But it's not due to the fact that I'm a diplomat or working for the government. We have lots of colleagues who have a very clear point of view and are party members. It's not a must, so that's the good side and a typical peculiarity of the German Foreign Office. When you compare, there is not much of a change. And this is also my first subject. Will there be any change? Is there anything about continuity or discontinuity after elections? We have had many changes during the last years or decades, and we've had governments in different constellations. After so many decades of a foreign office run by a liberal foreign minister, the famous Hans-Dietrich Genscher, and I was sort of initialized by him as well, or at least under his tenure. People were sometimes thinking about what might happen if one day somebody as, for example, this young green Joschka Fischer, if they come, that will be something like Robespierre after the French Revolution. They will run around and cut off heads of almost everyone, because, I mean, there was a whole generation of German diplomats was, so to speak, born and raised under the liberal foreign minister. And when Joschka Fischer took office after he and the Social Democratic Chancellor Gerhard Schröder had won the election in 1998, I was in Washington, D.C. He came, and everybody was full of tension, saying, wow, what is he going to do now? And you know, he just, out of 10,000 diplomats in the Foreign Office, he just brought 5 or 6 of his personal colleagues from the campaign and from his office to be his chief of cabinet, his private secretary, the head of the parliamentary division, and speaker, and that was it. And when he came to Washington, that was his second visit immediately after assuming office. He went to Paris and then to Washington, D.C. He said, you know, I'm going to give you all my loyalty, and this is not a one-way street. If I receive loyalty from you, I will not look at your belief, at your religious, your ethnic, your whatsoever. It's just professionality and loyalty. And that was it. And he had a huge success. And everybody said, thank God, this man is very good for us as the Foreign Service. But he was not only good for the Foreign Service. I mean, there was an op-ed almost every second day about this sneakers, former taxi driver and revolutionary Joschka Fischer. So he was a quite lively person. And he was, years later, followed by Frank-Walter Steinmeier from Social Democrats. And he was a member of the, and vice chancellor in a big coalition. So with Angela Merkel at that time being chancellor, that was the beginning of her career, and first female chancellor ever. And Frank-Walter Steinmeier was also very good for the German Foreign Service. And he also brought maybe 5, if at all, people from his own staff, people he works really very closely together with. And that was the same when Guido Westerwelle, a few years later, assumed office. And this shows that there is quite a difference between the US Foreign Service and the German Foreign Service, because, and we are grateful, because the so-called career diplomats, they are not being suspended or chased out of office after an election in whichever direction. So this is the good news for us. And it also means there is a very large continuity in German foreign policy. There might be some struggling about wages and interior security, many issues. But this is just to sharpen the eyes for voters to find out differences, because the difference, in fact, is not that strong. I had on the 22nd of September, our election day, on a Sunday, we had 90 guests at our home for an election party, more election than party, but we received the first forecasts, the projections, etc. And Rabbi Schiff, a very prominent member of the Jewish community here in Miami, he said, what do you think? Who of these parties who are now in the race are more supportive for the Jewish community or for the relations towards German-Israeli or Jewish relations? I said, don't worry. They're all very, very clear about this, because there are hardly any differences when it comes to foreign policy, and not at all with regard, for example, to the Jewish community or to other groups. There was an alliance, I think you are familiar with facts and figures, Alliance for Germany. They are considered to be fools in most of the, I mean, the large part of the voter community, it's just a group that doesn't have any program at all. They just say, no, we want to go back to the D-Mark, and we don't want the euro, and we don't want this, and we don't want that. Germany without Europe, there will not be a Europe without Germany. This is quite clear. And there will not be a Germany without Europe. This is also quite clear. Having said that, I just want to open a discussion, and I'm happy to answer to questions. I just wanted to give you a few ideas. More to come out. I want to save time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Without further ado, I would say then.
Okay, I'm going to stand up because I can't see. There's a computer in my way. So, my name is Louise Davidson. I'm from the University of Miami, and I study comparative politics. So when I think about the German election, I don't think about it from the perspective of the Foreign Service or of the European Union. I think what's going on inside this country. So this is how I think my talk is going to differ from the first two or the other two we're going to hear. And I was very relieved to hear you say that you're not a supporter of any one party, because I was a little nervous preparing my remarks. I've known all the previous consuls, and I kind of know where they stand. And we met one time for 5 minutes, and I couldn't figure out. So now I don't have to worry about offending you, hopefully, too much. So what I'd like to do today are 4 different things. First of all, give you a little bit of background about what the national mood was in Germany in the run-up to the election. So what was the backdrop against which these elections took place? The second thing I want to do is introduce you to the candidates and their parties, and the types of strategies they use to contest this campaign. And these two are related, of course, because you have to tailor your campaign to the situation you find yourself in. Then I want to talk about the results, and in contrast to the United States, sometimes election results in Germany are not quite clear what they mean or what comes next. So then we'll talk about what happened after the election, which to my mind is almost more interesting than what happened before the election. So what was the backdrop to these elections? I'm going to show you some polling data from a major polling agency in Germany. And the last German election was held in 2009. So this gives us data over Merkel's last term. German voters were routinely asked, how well is the government doing its job? And they could give an answer gut, which means good, or schlecht, which means bad. And we can see that since 2011, the voters in Germany have believed, on balance, that the government was doing a good job. So if you're an incumbent, like Angela Merkel, going into an election with this record is giving you a big advantage, right? So if we think about this being 50% of the voters, over 50%, almost 70% of the voters think Merkel's doing a good job. So she had a big advantage, and her government had a big advantage going into this campaign. Now in Germany, what's very common is that we see what are called coalition governments. So it's not one party that controls the government, but in this case it was a coalition of 2 parties. As our consul alluded to, the other party in this coalition was the Liberal Party, the Free Democrats. So this statistic doesn't tell us if people think that Angela Merkel and her Christian Democrats are doing a good job, or her coalition partner, the Free Democrats, are doing a good job, or both of them. So one of the things that the pollsters asked about is how do you assess, or how do voters assess, the different parties within the coalition? And here we can see this blue line is the average for the coalition as a whole. Anything that's in the positive range here means people are satisfied. Anything in the negative range means people are dissatisfied. So we can see again, since about 2011, on balance, the coalition is weighted as doing a good job. People are satisfied with the government. But we can see here really clearly that people are super satisfied with Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats, and they're a lot less satisfied with her coalition partner, the Free Democrats, or the Liberals. Which is kind of a strange finding because, of course, they're together in a coalition, so they're kind of both supposed to be governing. And here one party seems to do a lot better than the other party. And I think one of the reasons for this difference has to do with the issues that Germans were paying attention to. So in addition to asking with satisfaction with the government, pollsters in Germany also asked the voters, what do you think are the most important problems facing Germany? And for those of you who are political scientists, you'll be interested in knowing, well, how exactly is this question formatted? What are they asking in the poll? And the answer is they ask people to spontaneously say what they think the biggest problem or problems are. So in this poll, people aren't being given prompts. They're supposed to generate what they think is most important. Now this data covers this entire century from 2000 up till the present. We're mostly concerned about this period, Merkel's last term. And one of the things that you can see here is that there's this is the percentage of people who give a response. And coming up to this election in 2013, there's no problem that more than 30% of the population thinks is a problem. Right? Which means that if less than 30% of your population agree on any one problem, it means your country's actually not really facing too many problems, or at least the voters don't perceive there's too many problems in your country. So this already speaks well for the coalition. What's interesting for me here is this black line. Wirtschaftslage means kind of the economic situation of the country. Angela Merkel's coalition partner, the Free Democrats, are considered to be very good at economics. And we can see pretty much nobody's worried about the economy. So their big issue is kind of not really pressing. If there is an issue of concern in the run-up to the election, it's this yellow line here, which is the euro crisis. Now, for many governments in Western Europe, the euro crisis meant a big problem. Right? If you look what happened in Greece, what happened in Italy, what happened in France, incumbents lost their jobs because they mismanaged the economy and there was a euro crisis. In Germany, of course, the economy wasn't mismanaged to that degree, and in fact, the euro crisis can kind of be seen as Angela Merkel successfully navigating this crisis and taking a big role on the European stage. And so, to the degree that people are paying attention to politics and they're thinking about politics, they might be thinking about how Merkel goes out and kind of tries to solve the euro crisis and portrays Germany well on a world stage. So I think that made Merkel look good, although of course some people are upset about of the euro crisis and some transfers that have gone from Germany to other countries. We can talk about how that played out in a second. But I think what's also important here is that if we think about this important foreign policy issue, it was Merkel who was handling this. It was not her foreign minister. Usually in Germany, what happens is the big party has the chancellor and the small party has the foreign minister. And usually foreign ministers are incredibly popular. So the names that the Consul mentioned were all very famous, very popular politicians within Germany. During the last 4 years, the Free Democrats had the foreign minister. His name was Guido Westerwelle, but he was not a very visible foreign minister. He was not a very popular foreign minister. And kind of the bonus that you get for going out on the world stage and shaking hands with other diplomats in other countries all fell to Merkel. So Merkel got all the fame and the glory of being a foreign minister, and Westerwelle didn't. And we can see how this plays out in terms of politicians' reputations. So the German polling agencies ask about politicians' skill and likability. Personally, I think this is a weird combination. Right? You can be really likable and totally competent, or really competent and totally unlikable. But they put these two things together, and they ask people to rate politicians on skill and likability. And again, we're interested here in this last 4-year period or so in the run-up to the election. This black line represents Angela Merkel. And we can see of all the politicians in Germany in the run-up to the election, she's far and above the most popular in the country. Very, very popular, very well liked. Far better liked than Pierre Steinbrück, who was her main challenger. He's this red line way down here. And far, far better liked than Guido Westerwelle, the foreign minister, this yellow line down here. So his numbers are in the negative. He's actually disliked. So what we usually see going into the German election is maybe a chancellor who's somewhat controversial and a foreign minister who's very popular. And here we see the opposite, an incredibly popular chancellor, far more popular than anybody else, and a foreign minister who's actively disliked. So this was the backdrop against which the election campaign was fought. German election campaigns are mercifully much shorter than those in the United States. They don't last years, they last for weeks. So we have we're looking at a campaign that really went on in August and September, and not much beyond that. So the first party I want to talk about is the Christian Democratic Union, or the CDU. For those of you who know German politics, you'll know that the CDU is a Christian Democratic Party in 15 states in Germany. And there's one special state in Germany called Bavaria, which is the home of Markus, which is why I mentioned this, otherwise I wouldn't have put it on my slide. I figured I owed it to him. And there's a special branch of the Christian Democrats in Bavaria called the CSU. So it would be kind of like if we had Republicans in 49 states and then Texas Republicans in Texas, which is a big, rich, conservative state, which is pretty much the situation. But their lead candidate here was Angela Merkel. And we already know people like her, people like the government, they're satisfied. So unsurprisingly, the #1 theme in the Christian Democrats campaign was Merkel. So this is one of their main images here. It says, Germany is strong and it should stay that way. So we're doing great, don't get rid of our chancellor now. And we can see here's Merkel, I think either she's getting into a car, she's driving a car, but the implication is we should keep her in the driver's seat. Right? We're doing great, why change things? And this is another image that says we are electing the chancellor. And here, German is a gendered language, so when they say Kanzlerin, it really means we're electing the woman chancellor. So again, they're stressing we have an incumbent, she's really strong. The other big thing the CDU stressed in this election was Merkel's hands. This gesture here that she does is her kind of trademark gesture. And they put that on lots of different posters, and they really stress that. So I kind of think of this as the Allstate campaign. Have you ever seen Allstate's an American insurance company, and they say, you're in good hands with Allstate? Well, I think the CDU is saying here, we're in good hands with Merkel. So this was a campaign that didn't really stress issues. It stressed a person who was really popular, which makes sense because she was their biggest asset. The Free Democrats, her coalition partner, had a strategy, a slogan that was called Nur mit uns, only with us, basically saying we know Merkel's going to be reelected, and so we need to think about what coalition partner she might have, and only with us you're going to get certain things. So they claimed, for example, that there would be tax relief for the middle class, only with us. I think this campaign promise kind of wasn't very inspiring to a lot of people because they've been governing for 4 years and they hadn't gotten this tax decrease that they were talking about. So it seemed like, well, we haven't done it now, why might you do it again? Their lead candidate was not the foreign minister, the unpopular foreign minister, but Rainer Brüder, who was the economics or finance, economics minister. To my mind, he wasn't particularly charismatic. This wasn't a particularly lively campaign. It really didn't have any kind of compelling themes to set the Free Democrats off from their CDU coalition partner. Basically, it was kind of like just elect us again. So that's what was going on to the left of to the right of the political spectrum. If we look to the left, the party that was the main challenger, or traditionally has been the main challenger of the Christian Democrats, are the Social Democrats, or the SPD. Historically, both the CDU and the SPD were very large parties of equal strength. In recent years, the SPD has had some trouble in the polls. It's moved more toward the center, and it's become more difficult, I think, for German voters to distinguish what the SPD stands for and what the CDU stand for. They both are stressing, I think, more middle-class issues, and the SPD has moved further away from its more working-class roots. So they don't, I think, have at this point in time a very strong programmatic platform that distinguishes them from the Christian Democrats. They tried to stress some themes that might appeal to the left of the political spectrum. Here's a poster talking about for old age without poverty. They also stressed a minimum wage. But these themes were kind of, I think, half-heartedly communicated in their campaign. Instead, Per Steinbrück, which is their candidate here, I think wasn't really a credible person to stress working-class themes. Once he was nominated as their lead candidate, it came out that he'd taken hundreds of thousands of euros in speaking fees, which he didn't think seemed to be a big deal, but to the average person, if you got hundreds of thousands of dollars in speaking fees, that would be a big deal for you. I was hoping today, but I didn't get them.
You get lunch.
I get lunch, right? Exactly. So that's a big deal for me, right? But hundreds of thousands of euros would be a bigger deal. Shortly thereafter, he complained politicians didn't get paid enough, and he also said that you should never drink cheap wine. So he was kind of probably not the most credible representative of leftist interests. He didn't really do a good job of articulating distinct middle-class interests. He was criticized a lot in the press, and this was his response. So a week before the election, we have Merkel making this hand gesture, you're in good hands, and this is what Steinbrück says to a critical press. So this was the campaign that the SPD chose to stress. He also, I think, tactically criticized Merkel a lot. We went to his last Markus Thiel in Berlin observing the elections, and we went to the final Social Democratic rally, and he spent a lot of time criticizing Merkel, which seems to me to be a mistake. If you're an unpopular candidate and you're going up against someone super popular, it's probably better to stress ideas rather than ad hominem attacks. Another party to the left of the political spectrum at the moment are the Green Party. The Green Party has kind of an alternative view of how politics should be done, so they don't run with just one lead candidate. They always pick a leading male and a leading female candidate. So these are their lead duo here going into this election. The Greens have often historically stressed kind of progressive stances on social issues, and that distinguishes them from the other parties. So one thing that they did do in this campaign was to stress, for example, providing preschools and increasing preschool funding, which is an issue of concern to many people in Germany. And they also kind of took another stance that fits in with their kind of progressive stances on a lot of social issues, and that is they proposed an idea for what they call the Veggie Day. And they said that in Germany, workplace cafeterias, so if you think about FIU, right, the FIU dining hall, should have one day a week where they don't serve meat. They should only serve vegetarian dishes. This wasn't the cornerstone of their platform, but it was certainly part of the platform, and it was something that a lot of their opponents picked up and ran with. And so this is a poster from the FDP saying, Veggie Day, no thank you. And the FDP says to the voters, you can decide for yourself when you're going to eat meat and how much meat you want to eat. And Germans like to eat meat, so this Veggie Day idea kind of backfired on the Greens. It wasn't a particularly popular idea. The other thing that the Greens proposed to do in this election campaign was to raise taxes. They proposed that Germany should collect more taxes to help the younger generation avoid debt. And this turned out to be, in the long run, not a very popular idea. It turns out after the Greens proposed this, it was discovered that the Green voters are some of the people with the highest incomes in Germany, which I think perhaps the Greens had. Another party on the German political spectrum is the Left Party. The Left Party is the successor to the Communist Party that was present in Eastern Germany, but it also involves people from Western Germany now who broke away from the Social Democrats, and they stressed real issues that would be of interest to working class people, things like rent and utilities being affordable for all. German electric prices have gone up a lot, and they were really and rents have gone up in some major cities, so they're capitalizing on that. And they're also a very pacifist party, calling on banning weapon exports, and this was particularly salient in the run-up to the election because some of the chemical weapons that were used in Syria were produced by German firms, and so the left really stressed that. And they also stressed ending all German military involvements abroad, which are actually not very aggressive military movements anyway. They're mostly training police and peacekeepers in crisis-prone areas. So this was their platform. And the final party that I want to talk about was already alluded to earlier. A new party came on the scene this year that had never existed before, called the Alternative for Germany, or the Alternative für Deutschland. And they claim to be pro-Europe, but anti-Euro. So their main platform was to get rid of the euro, go back to the D-Mark, which would utterly destroy the German economy. But they argue we should take the money that we're using to bail out Southern Europe and do things like fix our infrastructure at home. And one of the big questions in the run-up to the election was, how successful would this new party be? All the other parties didn't really talk about the euro crisis. They didn't really question the European Union, and this was the most Euro-critical party of them all. So what happened on election day? This is the election result. One thing I think that's noteworthy is that turnout went up. It was under 71% in the last election. Now it was over 71%, which is high for the United States, but it's historically relatively low for Germany, but this was at least an upward trend. And one of the reasons why turnout was up, pollsters say, is because A, Merkel was so popular, so a lot of people who maybe didn't vote before went out to vote with the Christian Democrats, and B, that's Alternative for Germany, a new party kind of attracted people who might have not voted before. So this graphic shows you the results in 2013 compared to the results of 2009. And we can see, unsurprisingly, given what we know about the situation going into the election, the Christian Democrats were the big Winners, they got 41.5% of the vote, which was 7.7% more than in the last election. The Social Democrats also improved their vote share, up 2.7%, but we can see at 25.7% of the vote, they're much smaller than the Christian Democrats, and this gap between the two didn't used to be this big. So the Social Democrats were not particularly excited about this result. Markus and I went to their election party, but it wasn't really much of a party move when these results were announced.
The only time, remember, when they were just starting to yell and they were happy, the Social Democrats, was when it was announced that the Liberals didn't make the 5% needed to get it.
Yeah, so it was much more happy about other people than not them. The Left Party again lost compared to the last election, but they were bigger. They were the third largest party. The Greens also lost compared to the last election, and they were really disappointed because between 2009 and 2013, their popularity shot up even into the 20% range. So they interpreted this 8% result as not being very good. The Free Democrats got 4.8% of the vote, and the Alternative for Germany got 4.7% of the vote, and some other smaller parties, or almost a majority of Germans, want this big coalition between the CDU and SPD. And what's really interesting, I think, that's going to happen in the coming days are what kind of negotiations this coalition makes, because that's going to determine some of the domestic policy results, but we don't know what that looks like right now. So thank you very much, and now Markus will talk about
I'm also trying to keep it short so we have enough time for you to ask questions or to go into more detail. Do you have any specific things? Okay. So let me just test. Thank you. So I'm focusing here in my short talk more on the implications and the repercussions of the German elections internationally, be it to the rest of Europe or the rest of the world. And I saw this picture and I thought it would be good to insert because you can see the famous Merkel diamond, right? Her hands holding Europe, the European circle of stars together. So this is probably what we have to exactly for the next couple of years. First, I'm going to show you a little bit about the reactions in the world, and then a little bit about the missing foreign policy campaign issues. Raise more questions about the future of German foreign policy, and then finish it up. So some of the reactions you can see here. I mean, this was the Economist cover recently, right? One woman to rule them all. I think that's a Lord of the Rings allegory or something. But it is true, definitely in her third term, right? She's also approaching Helmut Kohl, who had 4 terms as the longest serving chancellor. So I think this is probably well taken by the economists. A few reactions in France. Remember, France is Germany's most important partner in the European Union, right? Because they together determine a lot of what's going on in the EU. However, the French president, François Hollande, is socialist, so he's on the opposite ideological spectrum, right? He's a center-left socialist president. Of course, he had to make good faces. He acknowledged and he congratulated her. He said he couldn't wait for her to congratulate her. But he acknowledges the continued German dominance in EU affairs, and that also means that he needs to now start implementing economic reforms because France itself has become such a laggard in terms of competitiveness and economic output, as well as budget discipline, that France itself, because of the size of its economy, could become a problem for the Eurozone itself. And Angela Merkel wants to definitely do anything to prevent that. The UK. Yeah, the UK is rather one of the more what we could call reluctant Europeans, right? They don't have the euro. They're rather obstinate in terms of any EU policy decisions that would drive the EU forward. There has been, sometimes you have heard maybe the notion of the Brexit, the British exit of the EU that may become soon an issue under David Cameron, Prime Minister Cameron's rule. But he, of course, welcomed the result because she's a fellow conservative. And while he has started more recently to kind of push the repatriation of EU powers to national governments, so basically bringing policies back from Brussels to the national capitals. Angela Merkel, more recently also, because she stresses the important role of national governments in guiding the EU, they have been sort of allies in that regard, right? So not only ideological ally, but also in terms of the repatriation of EU powers back to the national capitals. With regards to that reception is certainly not the same for the southern EU member states, no matter if you look at Spain or Italy or particularly in Greece. Right? They were not keen. In fact, many public opinion polls in those countries said they would, in Spain and Greece it was 80% would not want to see Angela Merkel become re-elected. So they basically have to live with another 4 years of German dominance in the euro crisis of here. They will keep up the pressure on Germany to loosen the austerity measures that have wreaked havoc in many of these countries, and they expect now a change. I don't know, that maybe more optimism or idealism than realism. They expect a change based on the fact that Greece now, for example, the economy is starting to look up, right? They posted, or at least expect a 0.6% economic growth next year, so maybe there is a chance for that, and because Angela Merkel now is set to maybe work in a third term, more on her sort of her heritage, right? She doesn't want to go down as the chancellor who destroyed Europe, but rather the one who saved Europe. Northern Eastern Europe, they are congratulatory, but they are also cautious about the need to move now constructively forward with the euro crisis, because as we've seen, if you looked at EU policy, not much has happened in the last half year. Everything was waiting till the German election was over, because we didn't know if Per Steinbrück from the Social Democrats would have been the next chancellor, the euro policies would have been very different. So nothing really has happened. Plus, Angela Merkel herself, her government didn't want to reach out too far and pushing any issues that may be unpopular with the German domestic public opinion. And US President Obama noted his deep appreciation for Merkel's friendship, leadership, and steadfast support of the transatlantic relationship. Definitely, I think, despite them coming from different ideological camps, there is a certain affinity, particularly a pragmatic affinity, particularly with regards to the transatlantic trade and investment partnership, TIP, that could bring positive results for both of them. And China, of course, likes German stability and the economics links, particularly since the German export industry has increasingly now, because of the fact that Germany couldn't sell anymore to Spain, France, and Italy and Greece, which have previously bought a lot of German export goods. Germany itself has reoriented some of that losing export market share within the Eurozone to outside partners, such as the BRICS, right, or China. And of course, China was. Now, a little bit about the campaign. You mentioned this, particularly the Linke poster, right? There was actually one that said, remember, Germany out of NATO, Germany needs to become more pessimistic. There were, in my opinion, a lot of, the foreign policy was largely absent, right? Foreign policy has very seldom been high on an electoral campaign agenda. There have been only 2 instances in the post-war period, right? With Willy Brandt's Ostpolitik in the 70s, if anyone remembers that, and then more recently 2002, when Chancellor Schröder got his second term by campaigning against the Iraq War, or the Iraq invasion. In this campaign, I mean, we were over there, right? And I didn't really became aware until we got over there how much these topics, international topics, were blended out of the campaign, right? It was as if there is no euro crisis, as if there was no Syria crisis or any other, the Arab Spring crisis or anything like this going on. Germany was one big happy island, sort of the Switzerland written large. That's how it appeared, at least to me. Also, many analysts said the same. This was, of course, also a conscious campaign choice by Merkel's government, right? She did not want to make any, aside, the only thing that she said that there would not be euro bonds, meaning that the debt by the southern EU countries, right, plus would be put together with sort of the German governmental debt, and that meant a mutualization, we call it a mutualization of debt, that would make it easier then for the southern countries to recover, but it would drag sort of our economic value perception down. So she didn't want to see, that's the only position that she took, really. Others than that, the euro crisis was largely not mentioned. Syria was not mentioned. I mean, at the G20 meeting, she did not want to sign up to, John Kerry's resolution on Syria. Only later, right, had to kind of jump on the bandwagon. So this was certainly a certain conscious campaign choice by the government. In line, however, with a lot of the public opinion. In terms of, I looked at the platform, and the CDU platform, her government, the only platform in terms of the euro crisis policy said, well, we will provide solidarity in exchange for solidity. Solidarity meaning more German money or bailout funds in exchange for a solid reform of the economic and financial monetary policy, well, not so monetary policy, in exchange for reforms basically in the southern states. So, you know, you reform and we'll help you, we'll continue to help you. The opposition did also not capitalize, right, on these issues. Oh, by the way, before I go on, just a second. I wanted to show you this cartoon that you can see here, Angela Merkel with our finance minister Schäuble, and that was actually one of the few instances where the euro crisis came up because the finance minister, when was it, late August or so, he said publicly that Greece may need a third bailout. And that was basically a no-no, perceived as no-no, and he actually publicly stated something that he wasn't supposed to state. So here is a joke that he left out the cat out of the bag of the sack that may endanger Angela Merkel's victory, but you know, it didn't really resonate all that much. So the opposition did not capitalize on these issues either, in part because of that limited value of negative campaigning, right, against a very popular leader or chancellor. Also because Germany is perceived to be too prosperous. The Germans are doing fine, so why would you want to tell them that not everything is fine, right? You can have inward-looking focus. And also because of the volatile public opinion on any international issues. Remember, half of the Germans, 52%, are against continued aid in terms of the bailout. That's half of the percentage, so we can assume that the other half would be for more leniency, right, towards the indebted southern country. So you see here, this split of 50-50 amongst the German population goes through almost every policy, international policy. Yet, of course, the question of stabilization of the Eurozone, Euro crisis looms large. Here you can see the Germans are still 60%, right, way above the other countries are still have a favorable opinion of the EU, but at the same time, they don't want to provide further aid or bailouts. And the Germans, of course, have this historically built fear that more aid could eradicate the stability of the euro and lead to higher inflation. We're sort of inflation obsessed. It's, you know a little bit about German history. That would mean that in terms of the euro crisis, of course, that gave a platform for the alternative for Germany to become more powerful domestically. They have already said that they want to increase their campaign for the next year's European Parliament elections. So Angela Merkel needs to respond to that in some way, shape, or form. And we see more far-right radical activities elsewhere. Not only in Greece, where you probably heard about Golden Dawn, but also in the northern countries, Sweden, right, Finland, you know, that Netherlands, where far-right populists now say, well, maybe we should get these southern countries out of the euro because we are doing so much better, and there's this competitiveness. So this is the euro crisis. And by the way, I totally forgot to say a little bit about the title here. Europe's reluctant hegemon, right? Or the sleepwalking giants. These were terms used by economists and other major influential publications, so there may be some truth to that as well. With regards to the second point, the economy and governance. I told you already, so I'll keep it short, that there has been an export shift to some extent from the EU countries to the rest of the world, because Germany cannot sell to the euro, some countries anymore so much. And Merkel's favoring of intergovernmentalism, meaning less reliance on Brussels, on the Commission's proposal, but more reliance on bilateral or even sometimes multilateral talks with other EU leaders. Of course, the weakness of France, the weakness of the other southern European countries led to an increase of the power of Angela Merkel, or an perceived power of Angela Merkel. So the question here becomes, is it really more or less of an EU reliance, which I don't really doubt, because she is she's a very much an ally of European integration process, but she has a very pragmatic approach to European integration, less normative, less idealistic one that we've seen in the past. Or will it be a push towards, and that entails a push towards a more integrated and competitive Europe. Competitiveness for her, bringing competitiveness down to making the Greece, Spain, Italy more competitive is fundamental to her future EU policy. And lastly, the political culture. Like I said, Germans are ambivalent and split about their role to lead. Half of the Germans want any sort of foreign policy continue to be embedded within NATO, which is largely US run, and 50% of the Germans want a more autonomous foreign policy, right? In the ESDP, the EU foreign policy. The same with China or the US. You know, the Germans, half of them see these two other giants as benevolent, the other ones are more threatened by them, no matter where you look, right? So based on that public opinion poll, it's difficult to create an active EU foreign policy. With these, different views of what's actually Germany doing.
I think much of it is psychological. As you pointed out, Sikorski, the Polish politician, is somehow illustrating that kind of picture. Are we afraid of Germany doing too much or not enough? And this is the same feeling within the German population as outside, in Europe and outside of Europe. It's always the question, what is the best approach? I think Angela Merkel was very right to stress very clearly that there must be a perfect balance of intervention, solidarity, and responsibility. As it was put, solidarity versus solidity or responsibility. So she needs to find a perfect balance. Of course, the Social Democrats, the opponents, they aggressively attack this standpoint, saying that she's just sitting there and waiting, like sometimes a picture of Buddha was painted, of her sitting there and waiting until somebody comes to a conclusion that might please her, and then she comes out. But in fact, in such a very nervous situation, and much of economics is psychology, she was doing the right thing, at least in the perception of the German population. She was not nervous, not reacting every day on a daily basis. And that was the trauma of the opponents. They had to react. They wanted to do something. She didn't want to do something. She could just sit there literally and wait. And of course, now we have a completely different situation, since now she has to act in one way or another. And that's what many political commentators are pointing out. Now the time has come for her to do something, to come up with a strategy, or call it you said a
solution, a sustainable solution.
Some sustainable doctrine, or something which is not just waiting for and looking for consensus. But her approach, her consensual approach, was very wise. She didn't talk about any of these and react on these aggressive propositions. She was just the image of, we are together with our partners, and we do not do anything against the will and the interests of our partners. There's one minor thing that I need to correct, being a member of the German Foreign Service. It was not that we would have not taken a standpoint in that GA discussion when the carrying proposal was made. It was really the interest of Angela Merkel. She didn't want to do something with, going one step ahead before she hadn't had the opportunity to synchronize with European partners. And I think from the European point of view, it really makes sense. So it was not a mistake. It was the understanding, I will go and see my European partners next evening at the Gymnich style, the informal meeting with my European colleagues. That can't, because everybody's waiting for a mistake. There are so many interests. Everybody has interests. The Southern Europeans, the Northern Europeans, everybody. And if she makes a mistake, if she would have said, if she had said yes to, I'll sign, 5 minutes later, everybody, all the small member states of the European, would have had the right to say, well, this is a European Union. This is not, as the Spiegel titled, Welcome to Merkel Land. So she is very cautious, and this is a very good thing. Of course, she needs to come up with specific a program.
Just very quickly to your point, I think one of the problems here is that we have economic integration has gone very far and very fast. currency, a united currency. Political integration lags behind. So the problem is the Germans, who need to bail out other areas, are not in a political union with the Greeks and the Spaniards and the Italians. They have only their domestic audience. So I think part of this is a problem of uneven integration across policies.
Plus the fact that this is unprecedented, right? So every step is a step into new land. You don't know exactly what will happen in every policy reaction. And China has shown commitment, in terms of the financial provisions that were provided by the German government, that those safety as well as the fiscal compact, right? So she's willing to move forward, but for her, the competitive aspect and a sort of a stringent application of the Growth and Stability Pact for the euro is more important than anything else.
Just add one more sentence. The opponent, the big opponent of the Social Democrats, was forced to come up with ideas and with suggestions. And he made a lot of mistakes. If you do a lot, you do mistakes. Angela Merkel did not say anything, but, well, and she didn't make any mistakes. Now is the time to come up with things, and we will see. But her point of view, her strategy is considered to be the right way, because it's better to wait before you make mistakes. But yeah, Steinbrück has taught to everybody. The more you speak, the more you're in danger to fail.
Thank you. At the same time, there has been this valid complaint by many other countries, right, that they cannot wait anymore. We see now almost a generation that's being lost in the southern countries of young people who, suffer 50% generalized unemployment, right? So that waiting can only go, at least with slow pragmatism, can only go so far. That's my opinion. But there's another question, Amanda. I think you.
All three of you sort of hinted at the German election being the end of the Eurozone, and that the EU was waiting for the German election to come to an end, to come to a decision now in the coming months of what the EU is going to do. I wanted to know if any of you know where Angela Merkel stands with the EU.
$2 billion euro question, right? Would you want to venture out?
Well, as we all think, said, there is not the golden solution. It must be an iterative way to find the right way between the the right way between both dangers. I really think we have to move forward step by step, and this is the Angela Merkel brand mark. The brand. This is her
politics of small steps. Right?
The politics of small steps. She somehow invented or reinvented this, and I think this is true what you just said. We are, with every single of these problems that we are tackling, we are moving on unexplored land. So it is wise to be very cautious. But there is a clear strategy. We will have Europe, we will have the euro, we will have solidarity, and we need to have sustainability or responsibility or solidity, whatever you call it. You have to find the right way. All these very popular solutions, get out of the euro or do this or do that. We are now in a situation where problems need to be tackled in a very intelligent and very cautious way. And that's her style. And this is why she fits into this, and that's why she ran only 5 seats short of the absolute majority. That's why the Spiegel called her the Black Widow.
If we look at who's been Chancellor of Germany before, and at least in recent times, right, we've had Helmut Kohl and we had Gerhard Schröder, both of whom were born before or during World War II. Angela Merkel was born, I believe, in 1954 in East Germany, so she's not Kohl lost his brother in World War II. European conflict was personally devastating for him. Gerhard Schröder kind of grew up in the aftermath of the war. He saw a lot of the destruction of World War II, and I think they were both more kind of reflexively emotionally involved in the European project. I think Merkel didn't grow up in that context. She grew up as a child. She's a Protestant. Her father was